Salvete omnes. This is I.28. Commentarii de Bello Gallico, Liber Primus, chapter 28. In this chapter, Caesar writes, Quod ubi Caesar rescit, quorum per fines ierant, his uti conquirerent et reducerent, si sibi pergati esse vellent, imperavit. So he's good at that impero, imperare stuff. Quod, the relative here is put in this position because it's referring to the events of the immediately preceding chapter, chapter 27, where the sex milia hominum, or rather the hominum sex milia sex, the 6,000 dudes, the 6,000 persons, which just sort of left, these prisoners that thought that, we can just walk out. There's so many people, no one will even notice. It'll be fine. Let's just do it. And so they do it. Well, ubi Caesar resciet, quod. Quod here is standing in for an id. Only quod has a stronger attraction to what was immediately preceding. So ubi, when, temporal conjunction, Caesar, Yavoy, nominative singular masculine, and resciet, when he came to know of this, when he came to learn this, this thing, the direct object of the verb, is what immediately preceded, that the 6,000 persons, they escaped. Quorum per fines ierant his. You got to take this together. Quorum here, it's another relative, and you should look for an antecedent. The antecedent of this quod was an implied id, and id refers to the preceding event. So it is accusative singular and neuter. The thing. What thing? The news, the report. Now quorum, genitive plural masculine or neuter, orum ending, what's its antecedent? It's not really an antecedent, an ante, cedo, cedere, a thing that comes before. Here it's actually a postcedent? Yikes. That's right, his is the antecedent of quorum. That's right, it can do that. His is dative plural masculine, quorum is plural masculine but genitive, of which, you can say whose, per, through, takes the accusative motion, fines, finis, masculine in the plural, fines, finium, masculine plural means territory. Through the territory, through whose territory, quorum, through the territory of whom, the his. Ierant is third person plural, pluperfect, active indicative of eo, ire, e, or iwi, itus. Caesar likes his e here. He chopped off the I, there's the stem e, and then added the third plural pluperfect ending erant, ierant. They had gone, per fines, through the territory, quorum of whom? Well, these guys. His, as I said, is the dative plural masculine of hic, hi, cock. It's referring to these dudes, the ones that we immediately were talking about. So these people went into, they left and went to the borders of the Rhine. So when Caesar learned of this, he, the verb here is imperavit, which takes a dative, explaining the dative his. So these guys, meaning the Germans, he ordered these, the inhabitants, the people, these people, whose borders, through whose borders ierant they, meaning the 6,000, had gone. What did he imperavit them to do? Because impero takes an indirect command. Very important verb, takes the dative taking indirect command. So ut for the positive, ne for the negative. Uti here is the archaic form, the older form, which Caesar sometimes uses instead of ut, but also notice imperavit ut is right down here. So it's about style, I guess. So uti conquirerent, so that they might go after them. It's cum quiro, and quiro means to look for, to quest for, like a quest. You look for a question. You're asking a question. So to inquire, to exquire, to conquire, which means to really go after, really look for. We saw this in conquirantur in the preceding chapter. Well, all these things were being looked out for, sought after. So you're not just looking like you're conquiro, you're conquiro, really, really looking for it. So after they're seeking that they might seek after them, third person plural, imperfect active subjunctive, because our main verb is going to be, well, this is a temporal clause introduced by ubi. Introduced, yeah, sure. So temporal clause, that's not our main verb. This is a relative clause, that's not our main verb. His, well, that is going to be the object of imperawit. Imperawit is going to be our main verb. So we're in secondary sequence, imperfect subjunctive. That they contemporaneously or subsequently go looking for them. That's what he ordered his, these guys. Which guys? These guys, whose borders the Helvetians had gone. 2, he ordered them to, uti, to conquirent, to go look for. So he ordered them so that they might go look for them. Et reducerent, and lead them back, bring them back. Also third person plural imperfect active subjunctive of reduco, reducere, reduxi, reductus. Si sibi pergati esse vellent, if sibi, sibi of course, the reflexive, it's dative, you should be able to circle it and draw arrow back to the subject, vellent. Actually, be careful though. If it's something like an indirect command, like it is here, we're actually going to refer back to the subject of the indirect command here. So sibi refers to Caesar. Sibi. It's difficult to tell because you can't tell just by the form whether the reflexive is singular or plural. You have to know what the subject is. And if you have something like an indirect command or an indirect statement, the reflexive will be used for the subject of the indirect command or indirect statement or even an indirect question. These are things which are formed in someone's mind, a statement, a question, a command. And the reflexive sui, sibi, se, is used to refer to the mind of the person who formed the statement, command, question. So Caesar ordered, this is a command, he ordered, and inside this command, what he ordered, introduced by uti here, or ne if it were negative, is that they go looking for them and that they bring them back. If wellent, they wished that they be pergati, cleansed, sibi, in his, as in Caesar's, the guy who's ordering them to do this, if they wanted to be cleansed, meaning if they wanted to be exonerated, cleansed of all guilt, you can see purge in there, in his eyes, in his sight, in the sight of Caesar. Imperawit, third person singular, perfect active indicative of impero, imperare, imperavi, imperatus. So when Caesar, when Caesar came to know of this thing, he commanded these peoples whose borders the prisoners had gone, through whose borders the prisoners had gone, to go look for them and lead them back. If they, third person plural, imperfect active subjunctive of volere, volui, wished to be cleansed in his sight, in his eyes. You guys, you don't want to suffer my wrath? I suggest you go looking for these people who are in your territory. Your hero, everyone. Caesar, huzzah, great. What a great guy. Reductus in hostium numero habuit. We can pause there at that semicolon. Reductus, well, look what happened to them. Accusative, plural masculine, fourth principal part of reduco, reducere, reduxi, reductus, to lead back. So his command, by the way, if this were not an indirect command, the object of this verb imperawit, what then would it be? What did he actually order them directly to do? These would be imperatives. Conquirite et reducite. Look for them, plural imperative, et reducite, and lead them back, plural imperative. Well, reductos, well, they got led back. Accusative plural masculine, perfect passive participle. So having been led back, accusative plural masculine, the ones having been led back. Those guys led back after they had been led back. So all that information can be contained in just this one participle. After they had been led back, in hostium numero habuit, or it's here the object of habuit. He held those who had been led back in hostium numerum, in the numero, number, ablative singular masculine, numerosi masculine, and then the genitive plural, hostis, hostis masculine, of the enemy. He held, or you could even say he considered, the ones who had been led back in the number of the enemy. Reliquos omnes obsidibus, armis, perfugis traditis, in deditionem accepit. Reliquos, accusative plural masculine, reliquos aum. It's best to translate this adjective as the remaining, because if you translate it as the English the rest of, that tends to trigger in your brain of equals genitive, and a lot of students then think that this adjective takes a genitive, and it does not. It is an adjective. It agrees with a noun in gender, number, and case, and yes, can act as a substantive, like any adjective. Now, if you translate it as the remaining, that sounds more adjective-y in English and less like it takes another case, because there's no of there. So reliquos, the remaining, omnes, accusative plural masculine, or nominative plural masculine, it's going to be accusative. It's going to be another noun, and this is going to be a substantive here. So all the rest, the remaining, all the remaining. Obsidibus, dative, it's going to be ablative actually, masculine plural of obsidus, masculine, hostage. Armis, it's going to be ablative, could be dative, but it's going to be ablative. Plural neuter of arma, aurum, always neuter, always plural. Perfugis, that's going to refer to the fugitives. So ablative, plural, masculine. And all of these nouns, the obsidibus, the armis, the perfugis, the hostages, the weapons, the prisoners, those who ran away, the escapees. Traditis, trado, tradere, tradidi, traditus. Ablative, plural, masculine, perfect passive participle. Hopefully you can recognize this all as one nice, beautiful ablative absolute. All these things are in the ablative. Here's your training wheels translation. With the hostages, and with the weapons, and with the escapees, having been handed over, having been surrendered. And from that rough training wheels translation, once you get good, then you can get temporal clauses. Once the hostages, weapons, and escapees had been handed over, after the hostages and weapons and escapees had been handed over, you can do a causal clause, since the, or because the hostages, weapons, and escapees had been handed over. Just keep in mind that this perfect passive participle has to happen before, because it's a perfect participle, has to happen prior to the main verb, whatever the main verb is. This is a perfect tense main verb, so this action has to happen before, prior, and that's pluperfect. That sounds pluperfect-y, right? So yes, it's a perfect passive participle, but when you translate it using a clause, go ahead and use the pluperfect if the main verb is perfect, because the pluperfect happens before the perfect. Or you can just keep to the training wheels translation. It ain't wrong. In plus the accusative shows motion towards deditionem, from deditio, deditionis, feminine, surrender. And then accapit, accipio, accipere, accapi, acceptus. To receive, to take towards oneself, ad accipio. This is to receive or to accept. Recipio means to take back, not to receive. Accipio means to receive. So third person singular, perfect, active, indicative. He received all the remaining ones, the remaining people, after the hostages, weapons, and escapees had been handed over in deditionem, into surrender. So he accepted everyone else into surrender once the hostages, weapons, and escapees had been handed over, had been surrendered. So he didn't take anyone else into surrender. He didn't accept anyone else until he got those escapees and all of their weapons and all the hostages. Yes, now Caesar will accept you into surrender. Stand-up guy, everyone, right? Yeah, sure, yeah, okay, yeah, sure. Helvetios, Dolingos, latobrigos in fine suos, unde erant praefecti, reverti jussit, et, quod omnibus frugibus ammissis domi nihil erat quo famem tolerarent, allabrogibus imperavit, ut is frumenti copiam facerent. Nice. So Helvetios, accusative plural masculine. Also Telingos, accusative plural masculine. Latabrigos, accusative plural masculine. I noted a usit here, so subject accusative, subject accusative, subject accusative. He usit, he bid these guys, the subject accusative, and then we're going to find an objective infinitive to do a thing. In fines suos, in plus the accusative shows motion. In fines suos, accusative, motion towards. Finis, masculine, borders. Plural, fines, finium, masculine, plural, territory. Suos, here's the reflexive. You can circle the su part and draw an arrow to the subject. This one, because it's not really contained in the mind of Caesar, it refers to the latabrigos, these guys. Os. It's different than the command, the indirect command up here, because usit takes a subject accusative and an infinitive construction instead of a subjunctive. So he bid the Helvetios, Tolingos, and Latabrigos to verti, return in fine suos, into their own territory, unde erat praefecti, unde, whence they had left, departed. Proficiscor, proficisci, profectus sum. Third person plural, pluperfect, its deponent. So proficiscor, proficisci, profectus sum. So you're used to seeing it as profecti erant, but remember you can flippity-dippity it around, erant profecti, whence they had departed. Into their own territory, whence they had departed. He ordered them to reverti, to go back. Et, and also, not just that, quod, because, omnibus frugibus ammissis, omnibus from omnis omne, all every, frugibus from fruges, this means crops. This is the ablative plural masculine. Ammissis, so we have amito, amitere, ammissi, ammissus, to lose, let go, with all of their crops having been lost. Because remember, what did they do before they left from home? Unde erant praefecti, from where they had come, whence they'd come. What did they do in that place? At their locative domi. They burnt down everything before they left. They set fire to everything. So Caesar says, yeah, go back there. Go back to your scorched earth. But we burnt down everything, even that guy's tool shed. Oh. Ablative absolute, right? With all of their crops ammissis having been lost, because they burn everything down except for the grain which they intended to carry with themselves. Domi, at home, nihil, remember nihil is nominative or accusative, singular, neuter. Erat, there was nihil, nothing domi at home, after all their crops had been lost. Quo famem tolerarent, by means of which thing, famem tolerarent, they might overt, or they might bear a famine. Third person plural, imperfect active, subjunctive. Alabrogibus imperavit, and because of this, and because there was nothing at their home by which they might avert a famine. Because, why? Since they had, all their crops had been lost. He ordered the dative alabrogibus, ut, and this is another indirect command, what they should do, that they might facere, third person plural, imperfect active subjunctive, that they might make a copiam, frumenti, genitive singular neuter, a supply of grain, is dative for them. For whom? For the Helvetios, Tulingos, Latabrigos. This dative here, plural masculine, refers to them. He ordered the alabrogibus so that they, the alabrogibus, might make a supply of grain for these guys. Why would he do that? Quote, because there was nihil domi, nothing at home, by which they might endure a famine. Why is that? Well, not because they lost all their crops. Ipsos oppida vicosque, quos incenderant, restituere jussit. And furthermore, he jussit, he ordered ipsos, they themselves, meaning the Helvetios, Tulingos, Latabrigos, to restituere, to restostare, to restand up, to build again, to rebuild their oppida vicosque, their towns and their hamlets, quos incenderant, which the antecedent is vicos grammatically, but also refers to the oppida because they're linked very closely by this enclitic que, by which incenderant they had burned down. So altogether, he ordered the Helvetians, the Tulingi, and the Latabrigi to return into that territory whence they had left, and because all their crops had been lost and there was nothing at home by which they might endure a famine, he ordered the Alabrogi to make a supply of grain for them. He further bid the people themselves to rebuild the towns and the hamlets, you could say the towns and the villages, which they had burnt down, which they themselves had burnt down. Id ea maxime ratione fecit, quod noluit eum locum unde Helvetii discesserant vacare, ne propter bonitatem agrorum Germani, qui trans Rhenum incolunt, ex suis finibus in Helvetiorum fines transirent, et finitimi Galliae provinciae alabrogibusque essent. Did you get that? So this thing, all that stuff, this command, ordered them to go back and stay there. We don't have any food. We burn everything down. Okay, fine. You over there. What? Me? Yes, you. You give them food. Okay, then. Now, you get back to work. Doing what, Caesar? You are to rebuild your towns and your villages, which you had burnt down. Why is that? Because. Quod noluit. He did not want. He fecit, did this thing. Ea maxime ratione. For ea ratione. For this reason, maxime, especially, very greatly, very much, the mostly. He did this thing for very greatly this reason, the following reason, because noluit, he did not want, nolo, nole nolui, he did not want that eum locum, that place. What place? Well, the place unde, whence the Helvetians had left. Vacare, to be empty. He did not want that place to be empty, to be vacare, vacant. Nay, lest, so that not, propter, takes the accusative, like ob, bonitatem. Can you see bonosa there and then itas tatus feminine? Yeah, bonitas. Goodness. The good ship. It's goodness. The goodness. You could also say the fertility because we're talking about the goodness of the soil, of the farmland. Lest on account of the goodness of the farmland, of the crops, of the soil, of the fields, that the Germani, lest the Germani, because of the goodness of the soil. Who are those germs? Well, they qui trans Rhenum incolunt. They who trans Rhenum, who across the Rhine, third person plural, present active indicative, live. Those who live across the Rhine. Ex suis finibus, ex plus the ablative, suis finibus, suasa the is agrees with the finibus, the su refers back to, it's going to be this, Germani. He did this because he didn't want them to leave from their transirent, leave from their own territory, and in helvetiorum fines. So this is transeo. Transire, transitus, transit, to cross over from their own territory into the territory of the genitive plural Helvetiorum of the Helvetians. And why might they do that? Well, because of the good quality of the Helvetian soil that they left behind. Oh. So Caesar did this thing especially for the following reason, which was he did not wish that territory, that land, whence the Helvetians had left, to lie vacant, to be empty, lest, on account of the good quality of the farmland, the Germans, who live across the Rhine, might cross over from their own territory into the territory of the Helvetians, and also, oh no, not only that, but finitimi, and be neighbors, finitimus aum, finitimi Gallii, to the Gallii Provinciae, to the province of Gaul. Finitimus, neighboring to, takes a dative with adjective, Provinciae. So this is going to be dative singular feminine. Gallii is going to be genitive singular, to the province of Gaul. And also que, which closely links the preceding Provinciae dative to this dative Alabrogibus. This is also dated with the adjective finitimi, so to be neighbors to the province of Gaul, and also, let's not forget, the Alabrogi essent. Essent, it mirrors transirent in that it's third person plural imperfect active subjunctive. So that the fear is that the Germans will might cross over, and that they might be neighbors to the province of Gaul and the Alabrogis. And we can't have that. We can't have them as our neighbors. Moving in, my goodness, that would be terrible. I don't know why the Romans sound like that. But anyway. Voios patentibus haeduis, quod egregia virtute errant cogniti, ut in finibus suis conlocarent concessit. And Caesar, furthermore, acting like a king in everything but the name Rex. Voios is going to be accusative, it's plural masculine. Reason will become apparent soon. Patentibus is going to be actually dative, could be also ablative. First glance, you might think this is an ablative absolute. Really, this is actually dative. It's dative plural masculine to agree with the dative plural masculine. Haedui, you could also say the I.28, get rid of the H. And it's the dative with concessit. Concessit is third person singular, he, Caesar. So he concedo, concedere, concessi, concessus. He yielded or he granted to the I.28 asking, to the I.28, and this is a present active participle agreeing with the I.28. So they were asking, and that's what he granted to them, asking that this is what they ask, patentibus, so that, which takes an indirect command, that they might conlocarent the boi, they might relocate, place, not just loco, locare, to place, but to conloco, cum loco, to really place, to like relocate the boi in suis, which refers to the I.28, their own territory. Why? Because they had been errant cogniti, they had been recognized by means of their egregia virtute, their outstanding manliness. Virtus, virtutus, their outstanding valor, virtue, their manly martial courage. Those boy can certainly handle themselves in a tussle. So he granted to the I.28 asking, while they were asking, when they were asking, to the I.28 asking that they relocate the Boii in their own territory because they had been recognized by their outstanding valor. And so Caesar grants it. You could even start off here. So when the Boii, when the I.28 were asking that the Boii that they relocate the Boii in their own territory on account of having been recognized by their outstanding virtue, concessit, he granted it. Quibus illi agros dederunt, quosque postea in parem iuris libertatisque conditionem atque ipsi errant receperunt. So quibus, it's going to be dative, and it refers to something preceding it, like an antecedent. Illi refers to something emphatic here, those guys. Illi here refers to the I.28, quibus refers to the Boii. And if that's not apparent immediately, how would it be? Just keep reading on. Context is key. Text without context is just pretext. So agros, Q is the plural masculine. It's the direct object of dederunt. They, meaning the illi, those guys, they dederunt, gave agros, fields and farmland, quibus, to them. So context, the I.28 would be the ones who give the Boii the farmland, who give farmland to the Boii, because they're asking that they might relocate the Boii in their own territory, meaning in the territory of the I.28. Can we adopt the Boii? Asked the I.28. Can the Boii come and spend the night forever? And Caesar, okay, sure, concessit. So they, the I.28, gave farmlands to them, to the Boii, and also they quos, which refers to the Boii again. Receperunt is a verb that mirrors dederunt, and that they're both third plural, perfect, active, indicative. Both have the subject of illi, referring to the I.28. So they, the I.28, gave these direct object fields to their new friends, the dative indirect object quibus, which refers to the Boii. And then they receperunt, received these guys, their newfound friends, the Boii, quos. They received them postea afterwards in parem, par pares equal, on par with, in parem iuris libertatisque. Both of these are genitives, with que, the enclitic, like an alien parasite latched onto the second, linking them together. They're very close together. This is jus juris neuter, law or rights, and this is libertas, libertatis, feminine, liberty. And conditionem, this is the noun, which goes with in conditionem, and parem modifies conditionem. Into equal condition, conditionem, condition, it's condicio, in the condition of law and freedom, of rights and freedom. And also, let's not forget, so que is a close connection, kind of a little, rights and freedom kind of go together, like peanut butter and jelly and lamb and tuna fish. And atque, well, that is a strong emphatic connection. And also, I dare say, ipsi, they themselves, the I.28, atque, no. Atque, when you have an equals word, as equal as. Atque becomes as, like simul atque, at the same time as, pariter atque, as equally as, aeque atque, as equally as. This is in parem conditionem atque, in equal condition of rights and liberty as, my apologies there, as ipsi, they themselves, referring to the I.28, nominative plural masculine, erant, were. And then receperunt went with quousque. And they received them, the boii, afterwards into equal condition of rights and liberty as they themselves were. So first, the I.28 gave fields, farmland, to the boii, and afterwards received them into equal condition of rights and freedom as they themselves were.